Last time on Invest in You, we were talking about the opportunities within acquiring a business that has already been established or starting a business from the ground up. Today, we're going to be talking with a master in business himself and how he created his business from the ground up and his successes and setbacks that he's had along the way. A lot of the talk that we have here on Invest in You is in relation to this discussion of money, financial literacy, and the creation of generational wealth, and wanting that to be less taboo. My hope is to help people break down the barrier walls they use as a defense mechanism when asked to talk about their finances, for people to understand that they don't need millions or even thousands to begin making their way to financial freedom, as well as offer insight and opportunities that are out there to take action to find their version of success and path to wealth. Because there's not one way to success. We simply have to find your way to success. They say it takes a village to raise a child, so why go solo with your finances? My name's Dina Glasgow. I'm the host here on Invest in You, and today we have Mr. Jason Miller of Miller Chiropractic and Wellness. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dina. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about your business and how long you've been around, where you're at, just a little insight.
Yeah, no problem. My business, well, I've been a chiropractor or a licensed chiropractor in the state of Florida for about 25 years, almost 25 years, going on 25 years. I practiced with some individuals at the beginning, about 5 years, and then decided to leave them and go out on my own. So I've been in the place that I'm at in St. Petersburg on 66th, 13th and 9th Avenue.
Yeah.
I've been there for 20 years. Love the location.
Yeah, it's a good run.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about why did I make that leap into doing things on my own? I kind of learned that working for someone, there's kind of a cap. You can only make so much money, or they're only going to offer so much money.
Right.
And really to make more, you have to do it on your own.
Absolutely. So was it straight out the gate on your own, or how long were you?
Well, like I said, I worked for this chiropractor for 5 years. I kind of learned a little bit about the business and then decided to go out on my own. And I'll tell you, that leap was very scary and very stressful. When you go through and you're thinking about that time when you want to create your own company, you don't realize how hard it is.
Yeah.
All the things and all the moving parts that go with it. I think part of it too is that in the medical profession, if I'm a lawyer, you need desks and stuff of that nature. But like for me, I needed, medical equipment that costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And so you don't realize the outlay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went into business, I was like, oh, I'm going to go this here. I'm going to make so much money right off the bat. All I need to do is this, and this. You get kind of inundated with that thought, like, all I need to do is this, but you don't realize that there's just so much more to it. Now, the advantages of working for someone is you can shut down your brain, go home,
right,
and that's it. When you work for yourself, when you're doing your own business, there's no downtime. You're always on, no matter where you're at, no matter what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You're always talking about business. You're always talking about your business. It's like your baby,
Yeah.
So when I first came out, I just didn't realize that all the hard. It was basically heartache. I remember getting the space and getting contractors to build out. And back then it was so tough for some reason. And basically I went through this time, and it actually caused so much stress that I'm not usually an angry person, but I basically had to fire somebody. I had to get other contractors in there. So it cost that much more money to basically fix up the mistakes they were doing to get back into, or basically to get ready and open.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I'm shuffling up. You don't have a job. So when you leave somebody and you're opening your business, there's no income coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the scariest part for me. Is like, how do I deal with that loss of income? And you learn really quickly how to basically look around and do things efficiently. So, when I got up and going, it still was there's such a learning curve. Starting from the beginning, how to do the whole medical process into basically making this some financial gain. I mean, I love treating patients. I love getting patients well, but at the end of the day, I have to pay my power bill. I have to pay the light, everything. So, I mean, yes, part of it is taking care of patients, but part of it also is about making money.
For sure. So when you started, I mean, had you set aside a nest egg to really prepare yourself? Was it financing that helped, catapult?
So I mean, I was in a networking group. I had a banker in there, and we had discussed what I needed.
Mhm.
And yeah, I did some financing. I took out an equity line of credit on my condo. I used that to really kind of finance my, I hate to say it, my payroll for me at that time. But I also took out a bunch of business loans.
Yeah.
And so learning that aspect of it and having that business loan I used to call it every month, they would just withdraw the money from the account, the business loan, because I had to borrow money for equipment and, that being like X-ray on my table. I would always call that my Mercedes payment for the month. So that's what I would, oh, there's my Mercedes, so I kind of use a little bit of both.
Mhm.
At first, it's like I said, it's exciting. You're full of that vim and vigor of wanting to do it and taking over everything. But it was definitely a learning curve, because dealing in the medical aspect of the business is that you're never taught. You're never taught any financial stuff. You're only taught what to do. They kind of clone you as a robot to diagnose, look at patients, but they never tell you how to do it financially right.
Right.
And then also, I mean, part of it too is the billing aspects of it. You're never really taught these things. And it's kind of, I wish if I could go back in time and talk to my past self is that, get the know-how of all the billing, get all that stuff done prior to jumping out on your own. I think I probably would have, done much better. But to be honest with you, it gave me that drive, or that thirst for knowledge on the aspects of everything. When you own a business, you better know how to, I mean, I hear about it in the restaurant business. You better clean toilets. You better sweep, mop, you better be chief cook and bottle washer. That means you got to do everything. You better know every little nuance. Not to say you need to micromanage.
Right.
What I'm saying is, like, you better know it, because if you don't know it, things can get by. And I think at the beginning, that's what happened to me. I think I just didn't know it all. And so I felt that I probably lost a lot of money not knowing that. And I know I did. I know I looked at.
I think that sometimes, the trial by fire, so to speak, is a necessary evil in a lot of cases, because it's that you're forced to learn, you're forced to jump in and do those things. And sometimes I think that really catapults people into knowing, okay, the next time I do things, I'm going to go this route, and it allows you to springboard for the next time, which you always hope that there's going to be a next time, right? If there's another month, payroll's still going to keep coming in. How long do you feel it took you to start to feel established after a year?
Well, I mean, I'm going to give you kind of a story about what happened and how it kind of things transformed a little bit for me. Was I had an employee there. I actually had somebody come into the office. There was another chiropractor to help, offset bills, which was fine. I was thinking to myself, yeah, this is kind of a win-win situation.
Yeah.
But she kind of like finagled a little bit, and we hired, not through nepotism, but we hired her mother, was telling me like, oh yeah, I know how to do all this. And it got to a point where I started my bank account. I'm looking at my, accounts receivables and all that stuff. And I'm going, what's going on here? And honestly, when she left, she actually asked me, she goes, do you want my mother to work for you? And I was like, no. And so, well, I know. What happened is that it gave me this is what happened. I had to go back and look through every file, look at every transaction, look at every nuance of what I did, and kind of catalog it and figure out, did I do the right billing? Did I collect the right money? Did I collect, all that stuff? And it took me probably about 4 or 5 months of staying late, looking through every file and basically going over it with a microscope to find out all the mistakes. And that actually is the time, it was the aha moment. I was like, oh, wait a second. I missed out on this, and this. I mean, I lost lot of money through that process. But you know what? It was almost like I was knocking on death's door, and I kind of rose. I was like a phoenix coming out of the ashes, rising up, because at that point in time, I was like, oh my gosh, this is how you make money at the job. And so, yeah, it was a hard moment, but it helped me forge like new understandings about what to do. And so I think that moment in time really helped me get to the point where, and this was probably about, I don't know, 9 years ago, 10 years. I've been in business for 20 years. It took me about 8 or 9 years to realize what I was doing wrong. So,
And when it comes to, I mean, medical, the insurance alone, I think, is probably a huge thing to try and understand and get right.
well, they people go to school for that, just for the medical side of the medical billing. I've taken a lot of seminars. I've really listened to a lot of boring stuff, because numbers, it's not all about the dollars and cents. It's all about what codes to use, when to use them. Are you using them at the right time? Are you maximizing? Because you could undercode, and still it's actually considered kind of malpractice to undercode some of the claims. You can overcode, and that's malpractice too. So you could, people do it. They'll do certain specific codes for a maximum dollar, but they're not really, they can't really medically make that. I guess what I'm saying is they can't justify it through their notes or through their reporting there, to get those extra, get that extra dollar for that extra code, and
So a code is like the service itself?
Yeah,
or
correct. So most of the time in our chiropractic world, we deal with CPT codes, and it's a 98940 to 98941. And those are basic adjustment codes, and you get paid a certain amount. Now, you have to understand, it's like Medicare itself is a federal, and they have their own program set up basically. And then you have your major med. And a lot of times with that is that I could charge $1 bazillion for an exam, but I'm only authorized to get $30. Like, you know what I'm saying? And plus the copay, sometimes, that's whatever money at that point in time. But yeah, I mean, people get, there are doctors out there, and I'm not saying chiropractors, I'm saying there are medical doctors that essentially cheated the system, probably overcoded or ghost billing, ghosting patients, like, or billing for patient procedures that they didn't do. That's highly illegal, and you'll get,
So for doctors anymore, truly, I mean, I hate going into doctors' offices where you feel like you just took the little ticket off the little thing, and you only get that 5 minutes. And if you're not explaining in that 5 minutes, it's just churning it out. I assume that's just big business being able to bill for the hours, not the service, or what is?
So a lot of times they call them E&M codes. It's basically, it's a management code. Time spent with a patient, and they know their maximum benefit. And I would consider this kind of like a major med clinic. Someone like, you go to your primary care physician. I mean, they don't reimburse the doctors a lot anymore. A lot of doctors are jumping out because it's just not fruitful. You have to see so many patients because you're only getting reimbursed for so much. And so that's why you probably feel like a ticket. You pay your premiums, but the insurance companies are not dumb. They have you have your deductibles, and all the co-pays. And back when I was starting, I could make probably about maybe $110 per patient visit. And now it's probably anywhere between, $35 to $45 a visit through insurance. And so I think maybe there was some fraud that may have been into it, or people over utilizing coding. And so I think that, insurance companies it swung towards that way of, being more reliable, I guess, patient reliable or reliant when it comes to paying for their own medical costs. So, I mean, it's definitely a different era, up to even like 20 years ago. I mean, it's crazy.
How do you manage now if the cost per I don't want to say transaction. That's not right.
No, I mean, that's,
The
yeah.
the cost per patient has gone down, you said, of what you're getting paid.
Yeah.
And insurance, I'm sure, has gone up.
Yeah.
How do you
You really got to be proficient. It's
Yeah.
really efficiency. Proficiency breeds efficiency. Essentially, you've got to be really proficient. You got to know what to do, where, how to treat a patient, and you got to make sure that just everything lines up. But yeah, you have to be very efficient. Everything has to be very efficient. You can't waste. There's no wasting. I can remember back in the day when a lot of these reps would come to the office selling their wares. They'd have parties, and you go to them, and they're very lavish. And nowadays, you don't see that anymore. I mean, I think just people are just being very, very cost, frugal and cost efficient.
Yeah.
And kind of basically to just kind of back it up. I always remember like the first year when I was first couple of years of practicing, right around Christmas time, we'd always get these baskets. I mean, presents, cards, gifts, and all this stuff. And nowadays, I'm lucky to get like a Christmas card from the doctor's office. That's how I used to like put them all over my office just to thank people. Like, hey, thank you for doing that. Now I can do it on the thumbtack board. So
Right.
that's how cost cutting things are going on.
Are you adding other verticals? Because I heard you say that you are trying to take your business in additional direction.
Yeah, I mean,
Not that
there are different ways you can go about it. I purchased some lasers, cold lasers, or low level laser therapy. I do rent those out. That's an additional revenue stream that I can do. That normally what I do is that you basically have patients take the lasers home, do self therapy. It's cheaper for them to do it at home, and it's more effective. So that's part of it. I have a lipolytic laser that I'm into using for more of a cosmetic part of it. But that's different than the chiropractic side of it. So, those are the things. I mean, now, you talk about like weight loss, everything's, about the Ozempic and the trizepatides, that. And unfortunately, with things of that nature, it's, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So when you deal with drugs and stuff, so I try to stay more or less along the lines of healing the body through natural ways and using, like energetic things like lasers. Also supplementation. I mean, that's a big part of my practice too, as well. I mean, honestly, if I really did focus on it a little bit more, I probably could make so much more money doing supplementation. And people have driving practices, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and, just doing supplementation, so
selling the supplements,
Yeah.
things like that. Okay.
Yeah. And, nowadays it's so facilitated through websites that people can even now, they just essentially, you just put them on a product, you put them in the patient portal, and they kick back checks to you. Most of the time, and that's easy for you because you'll have product outlay. Because a lot of times when I buy stuff at the office, it just sits there, right? I got to sit there and, all right, I got to move it. Kind of like cars on a car lot, they got to be moved. So it's got to be moved. That's why sometimes doing the patient portal stuff is good. So those are checks that I do. I get that, again, it's like a revenue stream, different revenue streams in that sense. I also do some other things with like essential oils, doTERRA. That's another revenue. Before the pandemic, and it was kind of weird, and I'm not going to get off on a tangent on this too much, but that part of my practice was very lucrative. The problem, though, when the pandemic hit, was that essential oils need to be experienced. You can't do it over a Zoom call. You can't smell peppermint oil.
Right.
It wasn't the same. So I kind of took a nosedive on that. But you know what? And there was a lot of things I learned. That pandemic just I worried so much that I was going to lose my business. I remember looking out in front of it and thinking to myself, how am I gonna survive? My new mantra was going to be, welcome to Walmart, I couldn't figure out like why, but anyways, what the weirdest thing was? I've thrived so much at that point in time. Things changed. I had to, patients were, I had to work a little bit longer hours, right? At that point in time, I didn't care, I had to let go of everybody. It's a very eye-opening experience. And that was another bridge into learning a little bit about business and about how you have to kind of diversify. Because, like I said, I was dead to rights, because chiropractic is something that I can't give an adjustment over the phone.
Mhm.
It's impossible. If they figure that out, then I will definitely sit on my couch eating bonbons all day, just calling people up, see one adjustment. But that doesn't happen. So in my business, you really do. You have to diversify. You have to be ready to adapt.
I think that's true of any kind of business. I mean, you become a one-trick pony and somebody else is going to figure out a better way to do that trick if you're not careful and you're not continually increasing it, right? When it comes to chiropractic care, how do you think, besides taking aside all the billing changes and everything, has the business itself changed at all?
I think, and I'm only saying this, Tina, is over time, back in the 50s, 40s, 50s, I mean, I think we've become, again, I don't want to get too lost in the health aspect of it, but we've become so much more toxic. So we require a lot more care nowadays. I think that's part of it. I think that if you look at the business of healthcare, honestly, I think that's probably a good place to go hunt if you have products or that's a great multi-trillion-dollar business, because people, unfortunately, when you look at the United States, and I know this because I've been over to Europe, and you can eat the food there and you don't have any issues because there's not a lot of they don't allow a lot of the additives that we get here. So we as a nation are probably sicker now than we've ever been. We would claim that we have the best healthcare system or whatever. I mean, I sit there and I kind of laugh at that, because you're looking at, I look at the rates of Alzheimer's. I mean, these are things that if you just focused your business on, or like autism or things of mental health, you could be very lucrative. And I'm going to say this too, and it may rattle some cages a little bit, but a lot of times people are having some post-COVID issues. So I've been really investigating that aspect of it. I mean, and the cold lasers definitely work. It's just, how do you market that? You got to be very careful too. As a chiropractor, we are kind of in a big pharma world, and they own all the, they as they say, it's the golden rule. He who owns the gold makes the rules. Mm-hmm. So, pharma is a big business, and they don't want natural health care to be out there for people to take care of themselves. They want you to be sick. That makes them money.
For sure. My thought behind the question was really exactly that. Like, we're putting all these preservatives, these additives, like all these toxins into our bodies. And I feel, and I'm sure you have your own take on this, probably completely different than mine, but I remember the first time I ever went to a chiropractor and I told my mom, I'm going to the chiropractor. She was like, what are you doing? You should not that's not good for your body to be cracked. And I'm like, well, it's not all about getting cracked. You know what I mean? It's about the manipulation of getting that stretch, getting that, getting the motion back. But when I'm asking about, has that part of it changed? It sounds like, yeah, because we need more of it because of everything.
Yeah. Well, it's because the toxins do deposit in the fat, and sometimes it can translate into the joints. I'll give you a specific example in the sense of smoking. Smoking decreases circulation. Okay. Well, the joints have cartilage in them. I mean, your spinal joints in between each of the bones have cartilage, and they have their own circulatory system, essentially, bringing in nutrients and taking out waste, and keeping those cells thriving. When you smoke, that circulation decreases. So a lot of times, and it's not always true. I mean, I guess, you're going to have those outliers on the scale of when you look at a bell curve, but I mean, smokers typically have more degenerative arthritic changes. Okay. So there's, that's just a specific point. But like for me, I think that when you're talking about chiropractic, lasers and nutrition really weren't that. It was back in the day, it was just adjusting the patient's spine, keeping it healthy. You pointed out, you said motion, and motion's the key to life and in anything. And if anything stops moving, guess what? It's dead. So chiropractic restores that vitality and that motion, and the motion, the vitality in the joint. So the problem nowadays is we're just battling a lot, battling a lot of stuff that's being deposited in our bodies. So before, a chiropractic adjustment would help people would get off the table and probably walk out of the office. Well, nowadays they're so inundated with toxicity or toxins that it takes or requires a little bit more care and time. So yeah, you're right. I think, for me, that's the truth. I mean, the thing about chiropractic, and I always laugh about this, and I always say, people always go, "Oh, I believe in I believe in like it's some spiritual, like heaven awakening thing." And I tell people it's not believing, it's knowing that I'm restoring normal motion to a joint. That's where the body takes over and heals itself. You're a self-regulating, self-healing organism.
Yeah.
Nothing can change that. The chiropractic mantra was, healing comes from above, down, and inside out. So, it's not the band-aid that heals you, it's your innate intelligence that heals your body. So it just needs sometimes a springboard.
Right.
And so a lot of times we take medications, we kind of hinder or alter that healing process. Now, I'm not saying medications like it, I'm not poo-pooing that. So don't, people say, oh, chiropractors are anti this, anti that. I mean, I think for like acute issues, I think the medication is necessary. But I think for the chronic issues, I think we relied too much on it. And I think chiropractic can be that bridge to help patients or people, get well and minimize costs for healthcare. Really, honestly, it should be the flow of healthcare should be chiropractic first, medicine second, surgery last. That's the way it should go. And you should go see your chiropractor first.
I think people just get scared. They think that chiropractic is solely about, oh, they're going to crack my neck. I don't like when they do that, crack my neck, or,
and that's, yeah. I mean, the thing about it, I kind of laugh. I mean, I'm not saying adjusting the spine. I guess they're watching too many Bruce Lee movies, crushing the guy's head off. I mean, there's different ways to approach the problem. I mean, not every, I'll tell you this. I have a patient. She's 97 years old. She loves to get adjusted. I hate doing it. I literally hate doing it, but she loves it. Oh, yes, I love. I mean, normally I use different tools in my office to adjust or to mobilize the joints. I have a table that I spent a lot of money on to help with that problem. But, it's weird. It's different approaches. What I would say is, you just want to find a chiropractor that you're comfortable with. If you don't like to get your neck cracked, there's plenty of chiropractors that do activator. I've got a pro adjuster at the office. I have a decompression table that does all that work too as well. Some people do love it. I personally am like kind of on the fence on both sides of it. Sometimes I need it, that joint mobilization. And sometimes I just said, all right, I just need the pro adjuster. So it varies.
Yeah.
Let's face it, there are times a business absolutely needs a new website built from scratch, done the right way, and Name and Creative can help with that. However, in some cases, you don't need to rebuild. At Name and Creative, we specialize in transforming existing websites with ongoing management, maintenance, SEO strategy, functionality enhancements, and performance upgrades that drive new traffic and engagement. Do you have an existing website that you're looking to evolve and grow? Connect with us at info@nameandcreative.com or visit our website at nameandcreative.com to get started.
What do you think's the craziest thing that you've dealt with in your practice? Obviously, the 97-year-old lady, you got to take very good care and be delicate, right?
Yeah.
But outside of her,
I'm not going to tell you my craziest story because that's for an off mic moment. But it was crazy. I've seen, I'm taking X-rays, you see a lot of weird stuff. But I think, for me, and being a clinician and finding out problems, I've had, a couple issues. I remember this one time, this lady coming in, she was probably about 65, 66, and she was coming in on a walker. I remember this. I remember I'm sitting there looking at her. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And, we do the intake. Of course, I do a very thorough examination. We do a thorough history. We want to make sure that we see everything. This patient had been to their primary care twice, to the hospital twice for low back pain, and they were shoving pills at her, like hydrocodone or whatever they were shoving at that point in time. And the weird part about it is I said, hey, did anybody ever do an MRI on you? And she's like, no. And I'm like, the hospital twice. So I remember. So I'm like, I read through the notes and I read through the radiology reads. Nothing seems to be what is causing this issue. That didn't make sense. It just didn't add up is what I was trying to think of. And so I remember treating her for the day. And most of the time, like I said, when I do decompression work, it's very gentle. It's very easy. You want to make sure everything's within that patient's tolerance. And she's taking it like a champ. And I'm like, normally people would be, no, that's too much, doc. That's too much. And it just raised hairs on my hand. And I go, this is not right. And I sat down with her and I said, whatever her name, it could be Joan, Joan, we need to get an MRI. And the weird thing about Florida is that she was under Medicare, which I accept, but I can't write a script for an MRI with Medicare. It has to go through their primary. But I can write a script and they can pay cash, which generally was cheaper anyways. Like if you go to get an MRI here in Florida. She went, I remember this. I remember the day too. It was February. It was a Friday. I get a call from the radiologist, like asking me if this person was a drug addict. And I go, no, it's this lady who plays tennis, loves it. It's like she's very healthy. I mean, if you look at her, she's healthy. And he was telling me he goes, I've never seen a spinal abscess this bad. And so he says, we usually see this in people that do crystal meth, like, like stuff like that. Yeah. Or other types of, I don't know exactly what he said, but I remember calling her up. I said, go to the hospital, give them the MRIs. The weirdest thing was that was a Friday. She went in on Saturday. They drained the abscess, got rid of it. She walked into my office pain-free. Now, I didn't do a chiropractic adjustment that helped her with that. I mean, I know that, but it was kind of weird how they just kind of shuffled her through. Like you said earlier, she was a number, and nobody really took the foresight to kind of just break it down and say, why is this going? We're just going to mask the symptom by getting her pain meds.
I hate that.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've been through a lot, bring the business up to where it is, thriving right now and doing really well. What would you say is a major win? And what would you say is a major setback that you've experienced over the last 20 years?
Oh, I mean, one of the things, and it's weird, it's only really kind of localized here, is that we were always trying to fight like this thing called any willing provider, meaning I would take the insurance rates regardless. But around here, it's kind of monopolized. They only have specific chiros that are on the insurance. And so, hey, if I want to take $15 for an adjustment, let me just decide that, don't leave it to the patient to go travel, 20 miles to go see a chiropractor because I'm not on their plan. They won't allow you on the plan. To me, it's been like that forever. I remember at the beginning, I was applying every year. And then, we already have too many doctors on the panel. Meaning you have too many people in the area. Now there's like 4 or 5 people now. And they only say this is like, if you're a minority or a female, you could get on these plans. And I know why. I mean, because if they didn't allow that, that's a big lawsuit again. So to me, that's kind of a big setback. It doesn't allow me to get out to touch as many people as I want now.
Who controls that? The insurance company?
No, well, it did. They did. So there was a specific group that basically in the throes of the night just elected these 4 people to manage the gatekeepers we called them the gatekeepers to this. And I would every year I'd get the same letter of rejection back. We already have enough people on the panel every year. I quit after a while and I found the letter. It's funny. When I was going through and cleaning out, I found the letter, saying, rejecting me for those things.
So that's like Florida Board of Health or who?
Well, here's the weird part about it. It's like, if I went to Ohio, like I have a buddy up there, he's on all the insurance plans just around here. It's just in this area. It's bizarre. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe people would say, well, why don't you move away? I just don't want to. Right. Yeah. After a while, you kind of establish yourself and then you start thinking about it. It's like, well, all right, I'm not going to fight over this anymore because it's just not worth it. But it's kind of disheartening. I think, as far as insurance, that's very big setbacks. You have to work a little harder.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that you can work smarter, not harder, as they say, but that's, probably one of the major, I would say if you're talking about wins, I think that I feel like I'm coming into my stride now. Unfortunately at 52, wish I'd have done this. But like I said, if I go back to my former self, I would know that. I think part of it is that, being debt free. I'm not saying, listen, I'm not completely debt free. I have, rental, equipment loans and stuff like that, but there's a certain amount of debt that you're going to have regardless of your business. But if you can be, I don't have any credit card debt. I have money in a money market account. I've been able to utilize certain tools that the banks have provided for me, to kind of play with that. That's always been good. But being in business, listen, it's people don't understand. I don't think really they don't understand how hard it is. And when I'm not shooting or patting my own back, I've done this all by myself. I've created this whole thing by myself, and it's hard. It's like I said, sometimes you feel beaten down, but one of the things I've always said is like, the rewards for me is that I'm my own boss. I can take my own time off. I can go travel. I can do this and do that. Again, if those are the wins, and then on top of that, it's like, if you work for somebody, it's just different. I don't know. I mean, you may know that too as well. I mean,
so definitely setbacks are external. That keeps a strain on you a bit, but the wins definitely it sounds to me at least as your financial journey. Just you've had a come up through all of this and really figured out what that looks for you. So this is just a rando question here, right? So if your financial journey, so to speak, was a movie, what genre would it be?
Oh boy. That's a really good question. I'm like a cinephile too. I love movies.
Oh, nice.
So I mean, maybe like a Kurosawa, like a Seven Samurai kind of like maybe movie, or a Shawshank Redemption. Yeah, crawling through 500 yards of shit, clean on the other side. But maybe I'm
That's awesome.
an Eddie Dufresne kind of person. But I would say I'm not a love romance. I'll tell you that much. Or a rom-com. I'll tell you that. Maybe it's Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on 66th Street.
Right?
Yeah. Nah, I mean,
it's definitely that entrepreneurial journey is not for the weak. No, you gotta go in with it with a thick skin and know that it's gonna be difficult at points, but like you said, it turns out worth it in the end. You set your own life how you see fit, right? What would be one piece of financial advice that you already said that you'd give to your younger self, but that you would give to somebody who was just starting out, getting out of medical school, wanting to start their own practice?
I think, working under someone's good, making a plan or preparing a plan. I would impart to somebody is that why reinvent the wheel? Go out, work for somebody, see if you can not say take it over, but find a practitioner that's probably a little longer in the tooth, tutelage under them, and then buy them out, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel there. You're taking over a practice. Now, there's going to be some gains and losses there, but I think personally that, instead of putting all the outlay out there, maybe you can work with the chiropractor, and originally that's kind of what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized, unfortunately, that after 5 years, it wasn't going to happen. So
with who you were with.
Yeah. It just didn't happen. And that's a story unto itself. But I would say, if I could say to myself, like, go find that practice. I mean, if I could say, I already know what practice, I would say, go find this practice, because you'd be probably retired by now. But
that's exactly what I definitely preach that to a lot of folks who are interested in diving into business. Everybody has this mindset that they have to do it grassroots and they got to do it all themselves. And they don't really they think that that's the cheaper route, but it's not the cheaper route, because they don't have the vision that you have. In retrospect, you see what all you had to dish out to get to where you are now today, where they could have, catapulted themselves, like you were saying, into a position where there would have been more financing opportunities for an established business. They wouldn't have had to scrape to get all of the tables and the scanners and all of that extra stuff, So I love that, because that's literally what my previous episode was about.
Well, and that's funny, because when you said that earlier, I was like, you said buying a previous business, and I said, that's what I would have done.
Yeah.
If I could have done it differently, I would have done that. Not that my intentions were to do that, but there was a day that was, I can remember it specifically, it was funny. It was like about a month before my, I forget what birthday it was, maybe 32nd birthday, I think it was. And, the guy basically says, when your name is out on the front, door, you can call the shots. And I sat there and I said, listen, one of the things you also got to learn is your ego needs to go right out the door. There's no, you can have the biggest ego, and I know people say that that's important for being successful, but I think you got to temper yourself. And I've said, okay, I understand. That was the moment in time that I said, I'm going to start working for myself.
I love it. That's usually most people when they want to throw up that chosen finger to walk out the door, And
it's funny. It's like, Dina, I was probably the model. Like, listen, probably in the 25 years that I've been practicing, I've had to call out sick twice. I've never missed a day. If I was at a corporate job, I'd get the gold hour.
Yeah.
But and it was food poisoning. The two times that I had and I remember I was, I'd sit there like, I can't be in here right now. And so, but never missed a day, never called in sick, never was late, never, none of that stuff.
It's your baby, right?
That's when I work for somebody, I've been working my whole life. Mm-hmm. I worked when I was 14 doing landscaping for one of my dad's friends. I probably child labor laws out there. I may get but I worked at Rogers Real Pit Barbecue, cleaning, doing busing and dishwashing and things of that nature that, you look at nowadays. Those jobs should be for kids to learn how to manage their money, and why they're not doing these things is kind of beyond me. But I never in my life, I always had a job. Mm-hmm. There was never a time that I didn't have one. There was a time when I moved up to Atlanta to go to chiropractic school. In between that time, I called up Ronstad, which was this what do you call it? It's a company where they basically put you in a job. Like, all right, yeah, I'll do that. It's like a staffing company. Mm-hmm. So it could have been just a day of moving furniture. I got about $50, but I ended up working for a baseball outfit for 6 months. The guy was like, I want you to work for me for, I'm like, I'm going to chiropractic school. But anyways.
I definitely agree when it comes to kids learning that work ethic, and not the financing part or financial part, of course, but I feel like so many kids just don't. They have that work ethic, like hard work, And
unfortunately, I think it's partly, you're right. And it's partly because it's like this, they see the social media and they think it's all like that. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's like this veil of, it's not real.
It's only like 1% or less than 1% that, end up going there. Okay. So a couple other questions. And then I think we hit a lot of stuff today. I really like what we put together. So talking about investing, we're going to switch gears a little bit. If somebody gave you $5,000, let's even bring it up to 50 grand. That's a nice little chunk of change. If someone gave you 50 grand to invest, where does it go?
Wow. That is a deep question. Deep question. Depending on where you're at.
This is just for you today.
50 grand.
Today.
What would I do with that? Honestly, I'd probably put it towards buying my own property for my clinic. That's what I would do. At least use that money towards that. If you want to invest it in a vehicle of some sort, like you said, could you be safe if I had $1 million or put it into a 4.5% CD and get like $80,000 a year or whatever? No, but I think that's probably what I would do with it. I would probably, at some point in time, I'd probably have to put it aside in some sort of investment vehicle. And then I'd like to use that as to buy some commercial property, because I always think, my uncle was always saying to me, he's like, it's the greatest thing is when you can write those rental checks to yourself. So that's saying to your company or whatever company.
Exactly. All right. So imagine your profession didn't exist.
Okay.
What would you be doing?
The weirdest part, when I was younger, if it's not medical, I was always wanted to be a dentist for some odd reason. My mom was always saying, I want to look at people's mouths. But honestly, I think here's the weird part about it. And this is not like just a sugarcoat to run a finance, but I think I'd probably be a good in some sort of finance. I'm really and I say this because I really take situations and I'm very analytical about it. I want to know why. That's always been my thriving of why does that happen? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And I want to know all the moving parts of it. I want to know, and I'll give you an example. I was talking to my friend, we were golfing, and he was telling me about his practice, and he's moving up to Ohio. He kind of did a dual thing. He's a lawyer and a chiro. And he's like, yeah, back in the day, I was making $2 million. And then I go, well, then what happened? Why? Why did this change? What were you doing then than you're doing now? And he said to me, I quit. And I was like, well, I need to know why. Like, what was the I'm always looking for the why. And I think in finance, that's one of those things. I mean, I understand there's some things that you won't ever figure out,
Yeah, but
but
most times 1 + 1 still equals 2.
sometimes, yeah, you're right. So that's probably, I mean, finance wise, I think that I would probably thrive in that. And I had this upbringing from my grandfather. He grew up during the Depression, and so it was weird to hear his story. I was so fascinated by the stories he would tell me. I mean, it was about finances. I mean, he worked in a department store for a long time. I mean, and he would tell me, it was so funny. He hated broccoli. And I was always asking, why did you hate broccoli? Because I ate it for like a year straight, and I was like, well, that's why you're 89 years old, Grandpa, and so during the Depression, I mean, to me, those things fascinated me. Why was there a depression? This whole thing about it. And so he was a very hard worker, and then it's even translated into my father, which is, I tell people this all the time. My father retired. He's 85 years old right now. He retired at 54.
Oh, that's awesome. Good for him.
And so, I mean, he was very financially. And so, my mom they were always good. It's that kind of that rich dad, poor dad. You ever hear that?
Oh, yeah.
My parents never drove the luxury cars. They always kept everything in moderation, but they've been retired for 30, it's almost 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I feel like you've been listening to all my episodes and you're just buttering me up right now.
no, honestly, I need to know. But if you did, I mean, I would tell you, what, you should have my dad on here one time.
That would be great.
And talk to him about like his financial strategies and what he did, because, and I say this, there's different eras.
Yeah,
okay?
for the bear.
My grandfather was in the Depression, I mean, that it's different then. And then my dad was a baby boomer. I think I want to say that.
Yeah.
So that generation.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, our generation or my generation,
I love that because I actually really wanted to do an episode with my dad before he passed away. And because a lot, I mean, by nature, we all have stuff that comes from our parents, right? And it's just ingrained in us. And there's definitely some really great things, but there was also some not so great things that I did learn from his habits, but overall, he was fantastic. And he too got to retire, early on, not too early. I mean, he worked for Ford for a really, really long time but was very savvy with his investing. But he also, back when the housing market crashed, the auto industry also had its time too. So he lost so much, having a lot of money in 401ks and things, tapped him out. His Ford stock dropped by a lot. He definitely went through some things with that too. And I want every conversation that I have, I want to hear people's experiences, not just, from, we're not very much far in age difference, from our generation, younger, older. I want to hear everybody's perspective because it's really interesting to know the whys. Like you said, I'd like to know the whys. Where did this come from? Like, why don't you like debt? Why do you like debt? Whoever's outlooks there are, I really enjoy hearing them. And I think that other people do too. And it gives people insight to be reflective on who they want to be and how they might change some things for themselves. So I'd love that. I'd love to have a little roundtable session and hear even multi-generational, what people have thought about. So that's really cool. All right. Last question.
Okay.
How do you define success?
Why do you think you say that? I mean, yeah, people can look at monetarily wise, success. I personally, I think is just enjoying your experiences, meaning like enjoying life. Yeah, working is tough. And I'm going to give you kind of the why in the sense of, I love seeing patients. I do. It's such a wonderful thing to see like getting people well. And to me, doing that, it's not a job. But I always say that experiences in my life is a success. It's not, I mean, money's, when we leave this place, we don't take any money with us. We really just take our experiences. And so, yeah, I mean, I've always heard that, I don't love money, but it sure calms my nerves. So what I would tell you is that, yeah, I mean, it's good to be financially stable and to have those things. But personally, I mean, for me, I think if you're rich in experiences, if you're rich in love, life and in love and, all the family, like enjoying your family. And I know you said, your dad, I know passed away. I'm enjoying my father and my parents and then my brother and my family. And, so, those are the experiences that I have. And I'm always that's where I feel I'm rich at. It may not be in the bank account, but I'm okay with that. I really am. I mean, I know that striving every day to do the best you can is a good thing. But I think being rich in experiences is really where it's at. I mean, and then maybe that's like somebody would say that's what a loser would say, but
I don't think so. I think that that's perfect. I think that you're quite successful. I think the business is fantastic. I obviously am a patron, believe in it, and appreciate you, and just everything that you do for all of us that see you on a daily basis and having your own experiences. It definitely defines success.
Well, and I would say the same for you, Dina. You're really, I always, and this is just a 2-year board, correct? As I always say that you're a great person, and I'm so happy to know you. And I was saying this, and you're very genuine, and it's very hard nowadays to get genuine people, and so I can tell right off the bat, like sometimes I'm not a great judge of character, but I can always tell when people are good, and so and I love what you're doing, and and I'm so glad that we met. I really do appreciate that, and so those are the things, people in your life and the experiences that you gain, and the positivity that you get from people. So you're a very positive person, even though I know, like I said, your father passed away and stuff. Those are the life.
Been a rough year, but everybody has those. So, we just keep moving on. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you. And I'd love
It's been fantastic. We'll do this again.
Yeah, we'll do it again. Maybe I can get my dad here. He'll teach you little things.
That'd be awesome.
All right.
All right. Well, that is it. Another episode of Invest in You. Come back and listen to us again. Thanks for spending some time with us.